What was I saying? Yeah, we're gonna get started. I read chapters 5 and 6 by myself. Oh my god, that's right. I wanted, like, literally as soon as I read it, I was reading it during nap time, and as soon as I read chapter 6, I was like, I have to make a video about this. I have to talk to somebody. I have to talk to y'all about this. What's her name? Sorscha? I love her. I love her. Like, literally, if her and Dorian are not endgame, I'm gonna be so upset. My girl deserves it. My girl just listen to this. But that didn't stop her from loving him as she still did, invisible and secret, ever since she'd first laid eyes on him 6 years ago. The hopeless romantic inside my soul is just like, y'all don't even understand. That it's so cute. And Dorian's such a bitch. I love him, but he's such a bitch for, like, not remembering her name, which I get it. Like, he had more important things going on. We're on chapters. We're starting with chapter 7, and then we're going to 10, I think. Yes, no spoilers, please. But yes, Sorscha's so cute. She's so cute. Do y'all mind if I go to the pronunciation? Actually, there's no pronunciation. There's no pronunciation in there. Never mind. Let me not even get, like, a spoiler or anything. Okay, we're gonna start. We're on chapter 7, page 48, if you're keeping up. Did you meet Rowan? Yes, I did. He's very intimidating. I think I almost said him and Feyre. I think him and Selena have said a total of 3 words to each other since he picked her up. But yeah. What am I trying to pronounce? That's a good word. That's a good question. I don't even remember what I was going to try and pronounce. I started talking about something else, and my ADHD brain did with that what it wanted to, and now that it's gone. I couldn't tell you even if I tried. What was it? No, it wasn't Sorscha. I know how to say Sorscha. All right. We'll just go, and then if I remember the word that I was trying to pronounce, then I'll ask y'all for help. But until then, it's gone. It's gone. Chapter 7. Nothing else approached Selena and Rowan after the first night. He certainly didn't say anything to her about it, or offer his cloak or any sort of protection against the chill. She slept curled on her side, turning every other minute from some root or pebble digging into her back, or jolting awake at the screech of an owl, or something worse. By the time the light had turned gray and mist drifted through the trees, Selena felt more exhausted than she'd been the night before. After a silent breakfast of bread, cheese, and apples, she was nearly dozing atop her mare as they resumed their ride up the forested foothill road. They passed few people, mostly humans, leading wagons down to some market, all of whom glanced at Rowan and gave them the right-of-way. Some even muttered prayers for mercy. She'd long heard the Fae existed peacefully with the humans in Wendlin, so perhaps the terror they encountered was due to Rowan himself. The tattoo didn't help. She had debated asking him what the words meant, but that would involve talking. And talking meant building some sort of relationship. She'd had enough of friends, enough of them dying too. So she'd kept her mouth shut the entire day they rode through the woods up into the Cambrian mountains. The forest turned lusher and denser, and the higher they rode, the mistier it became. Great veils of fog drifting past to caress her face, her neck, her spine. Another cold, miserable night camped off the road later, and they were riding again before dawn. By then, the mist had seeped into her clothes and skin and settled right along her bones. On the 3rd evening, she'd given up hoping for a fire. She'd even embraced the chill and the insufferable roots and the hunger whose edge she couldn't dull no matter how much bread and cheese she ate. The aches and pains were soothing somehow. Not comforting, but distracting. Welcomed. Deserved. She didn't want to know what that meant about her. She couldn't let herself look that far inward. She'd come close. That day she'd seen Prince Galen, and it had been enough. They veered from the path in the dwindling afternoon hours, cutting across mossy earth that cushioned each step. She hadn't seen a town in days, and the granite boulders were now carved with whorls and patterns. She supposed they were markers, a warning to humans to stay the hell away. They had to be another week from Dornell, but Rowan was heading along the mountains, not over them, climbing higher still, the accent broken by occasional plateaus and fields of wildflowers. She hadn't seen a lookout, so she had no sense of where they were or how high. Just the endless forest and the endless climb and the endless mist. She smelled smoke before she saw the lights. Not campfires, but lights from a building rising up out of the trees, hugging the spine of the mountain slope. The stones were dark and ancient, hewn from something from something other than the abundant granite. Her eyes strained, but she didn't fail to note the ring of towering rocks woven between the trees, surrounding the entirety of the fortress. It was hard not to notice them when they rode between two megaliths that curved toward each other like the horns of a great beast, and a zinging current snapped against her skin. Wards. Magic wards. Her stomach turned. If they didn't keep out enemies, they certainly served as an alarm, which meant the 3 figures patrolling each of the 3 towers, the 6 on the outer retaining wall, and the 3 at the wooden gates would know now they were approaching. Men and women in light leather armor and bearing swords, daggers and bows monitored their approach. "I think I'd rather stay in the woods," she said, her first words in days. Rowan ignored her. He didn't even lift an arm in greeting to the sentries. He must be familiar with this place if he didn't stoop to hellos. As they drew closer to the ancient fortress, which was little more than a few watchtowers woven together by a large connecting building, splattered with lichen and moss, she did the calculations. It had to be some border outpost, a halfway point between the mortal realm and Dornell. Perhaps she'd finally have a warm place to sleep, even just for the night. The guards saluted Rowan, who didn't spare them a passing glance. They all wore hoods, masking any signs of their heritage. Were they Fae? Rowan might not have spoken to her for most of their journey. He'd shown as much interest in her as he would in a pile of shit on the road, but if she were staying with the Fae, others might have questions. She took in every detail, every exit, every weakness as they entered the large courtyard beyond the wall, 2 rather mortal-looking stable hands rushing to help them dismount. It was so still, as if everything, even the stones, was holding its breath, as if it had been waiting. The sensation only worsened when Rowan wordlessly led her into the dim interior of the main building, up a narrow set of stone stairs, and into what looked to be a small office. It wasn't the carved oak furniture, or the faded green drapes, or the warmth of the fire that made her stop dead. It was the dark-haired woman seated behind the desk, Maeve, Queen of the Fae, her aunt. And then came the words she'd been dreading for 10 years. "Hello, Aelin Galathinius." It almost got me. Chapter 8. Hold on, I need a drink. Selena backed away, knowing exactly how many steps it would take to get into the hall, but slammed into a hard, unyielding body just as the door shut behind them. Her hands were shaking so badly she didn't bother going for her weapons, or Rowan's. He'd cut her down the instant Maeve gave the order. The blood rushed from Selena's head. She forced herself to take a breath and another. Then, she said in a too quiet voice, "Aelin Galathinius is dead." Just speaking her name aloud, the damned name she had dreaded and hated and tried to forget. Maeve smiled, revealing sharp little canines. "Let us not bother with lies." It wasn't a lie. That girl, that princess, had died in a river a decade ago. Selena was no more Aelin Galathinius than she was any other person. The room was too hot, too small. Rowan, a brooding force of nature behind her. She was not to have time to gather herself, to make up excuses and half-truths, as she would have been doing these past few days instead of free-falling into silence in the misty cold. She was to face the Queen of the Fae as Maeve wanted to be faced, and in some fortress that seemed far, far beneath the raven-haired beauty watching her with black, depthless eyes. Gods, sorry. Maeve was fearsome in her perfection, utterly still, eternal and calm, and radiating ancient grace, the dark sister of the fair-haired Mab. Selena had been fooling herself into thinking this would be easy. She was still pressed against Rowan as though he were a wall, an impenetrable wall, as old as the ward stones surrounding the fortress. Rowan stepped away from her with his powerful, predatory ease and leaned against the door. She wasn't getting out until Maeve allowed her. The Queen of the Fae remained silent, her long fingers moon-white and folded in the lap of her violet gown. A white barn owl perched on the back of her chair. She didn't bother with a crown, and Selena supposed she didn't need one. Every creature on earth would know who she was, what she was, even if they were blind and deaf. Maeve, the face of 1,000 legends and nightmares. Epics and poems and songs had been written about her, so many that some even believed she was just a myth. But here was the dream, the nightmare, made flesh. This could work to your advantage. You can get the answers you need right here, right now. Go back to Ardalan in a matter of days. Just breathe. Breathing, as it turned out, was rather hard when the Queen, who had been known to drive men to madness for amusement, was observing every flicker of her throat. That owl perched on Maeve's chair, Fae or true beast, was watching her too. Its talons were curled around the back of the chair, digging into the wood. It was somewhat absurd, though. Maeve, holding court in this half-rotted office at a desk stained with the word knew what. The fact that Maeve was seated at a desk, she should be in some ethereal, I forgot how to pronounce that word, glen, surrounded by bobbing will-o'-the-wisps and maidens dancing to lutes and harps, reading the wheeling stars like they were poetry. Not here. Selena bowed low. She supposed she should have gotten on her knees, but she already smelled awful, and her face was likely still torn and bruised from her brawling and varice. As Selena rose, Maeve remained smiling faintly, a spider with a fly in its web. I suppose that with a proper bath you'll look a good deal like your mother. No exchanging pleasantries then. Maeve was going right for the throat. She could handle it. She could ignore the pain and terror to get what she wanted. So Selena smiled just as faintly and said, "Had I known who I would be meeting, I might have begged my escort for some time to freshen up." She didn't feel bad for one heartbeat about throwing Rowan to the lions. Maeve's obsidian eyes flicked to Rowan, who still leaned against the door. She could have sworn there was approval in the Fae Queen's smile, as if the grueling travel were a part of this plan too. But why? Why get her off kilter? "I'm afraid I must bear the blame for the pressing pace," Maeve said, "though I suppose he could have bothered to at least find you a pool to bathe in along the way." The Queen of Faedom lifted an elegant hand, gesturing to the warrior. "Prince Rowan." "He's a prince?" "Prince." She swallowed the urge to turn to him. "Is from my sister Mora's bloodline. He's my nephew, of sorts, and a member of my household, an extremely distant relation of yours." They're related? They're related? No, it's okay. It's okay. You can keep that. Okay, but they're still related. They're still related. Not like Jon and Daenerys. Oh, where she was literally like his fucking aunt. Oh, that's icky. That's not. I don't know, y'all. Related is still related at the end of the day. Another move to get her on an even footing. You don't say. Perhaps that wasn't the best reply. She should probably be on the floor, groveling for answers, and she had a feeling she'd likely get to that point very, very soon. But you must be wondering why it is I asked Prince Rowan to bring you here, Maeve mused. For Nehemiah, she'd played this game. Selena bit her tongue hard enough to keep her goddamn smart-ass mouth shut. Maeve placed her white hands on the desk. "I've been waiting a long, long while to meet you." And as I do not leave these lands, I could not see you. Not with my eyes, at least. The queen's long nails gleamed in the light. There were legends whispered over fires about the other skin Maeve wore. No one had lived to tell anything beyond shadows and claws and a darkness to devour your soul. They broke my laws, you know. Your parents disobeyed my commands when they eloped. The bloodlines were too volatile to be mixed, but your mother promised to let me see you after you were born. Maeve cocked her head, eerily similar to the owl behind her. It would seem that in the 8 years after your birth, she was always too busy to uphold her vow. If her mother had broken a promise, if her mother had kept her from Maeve, it had been for a damn good reason. A reason that trickled at the edges of Selena's mind, a blur of a memory. But now you are here, Maeve said, seeming to come closer without moving. And a grown woman. My eyes across the sea have brought me such strange, horrible stories of you, from your scars and steel. I wonder whether they are indeed true, like the tale I heard over a year ago, that an assassin with Ash River eyes was spotted by the horned lord of the north in a wagon bound for enough. Selena glanced at Rowan, who was listening intently, as if this was the first time he was hearing of it. She didn't want him knowing about Endivere, didn't want that pity. I know my own history. She flashed Rowan a glare that told him to mind his own business. He merely looked away, bored again. Typical immortal arrogance. Selena faced Maeve, tucking her hands into her pockets. I'm an assassin, yes. A snort from behind, but she didn't dare take her eyes off Maeve. And your other talents? Maeve's nostrils flared, scenting. What has become of you then? Or what has become of them? Like everyone else on my continent, I haven't been able to access them. Maeve's eyes twinkled, and Selena knew that Maeve could smell the half-truth. You're not on your continent anymore, Maeve purred. Run. Every instinct roared with the word. She had a feeling that the eye of Elena would have been of no use, but she wished she had it anyway. Wished the dead queen were here, for that matter. Rowan was still at the door, but if she was fast, if she outsmarted him... A flash of memory blinded her, bright and uncontrollable, unleashed by the instinct begging her to flee. Her mother had rarely let Fae into their home, even with her heritage. Few trusted ones were allowed to live with them. But any Fae visitors had been closely monitored, and for the duration of their stay, Selena had been sequestered in the family's private chambers. She'd always thought it was overprotective, but now... Show me, Maeve whispered, with a spider's smile. Run. Run. She could still feel the burn of blue wildfire exploding out of her in that demon realm. Still see Kale's face as she lost control of it. One wrong move, one wrong breath, and she could have killed him and Fleetfoot. The owl rustled its wings, the wood groaning beneath its talons, and the darkness in Maeve's eyes spread, reaching. There was a faint pulse in the air, a throbbing against her blood, a tapping, and a razor-sharp slicing against her mind, as if Maeve were trying to cleave open her skull and peer inside, pushing, testing, tasting. Fighting to keep her breathing steady, Selena positioned her hands within easy reach of her blades as she pushed back against the claws in her mind. Maeve let out a low laugh, and the pressure in her head ceased. Your mother hid you from me for years, Maeve said. She and your father always had a remarkable talent for knowing when my eyes were searching for you. Such a rare gift, the ability to summon and manipulate flame. So few exist who possess more than an ember of it, fewer still who can master its wildness. And yet your mother wanted you to stifle your power, though she knew that I only wanted you to submit to it. Selena's breath burned her throat, another flicker of memory, of lessons, not about starting fires, but putting them out. Maeve went on. Look at how well that turned out for them. Selena's blood froze. Every self-preserving instinct went right out of her head. And where were you 10 years ago? She spoke so low, from so deep in her shredded soul that the words were barely more than a growl. Maeve angled her head slightly. I do not take kindly to being lied to. The snarl on Selena's face faltered, dropped right into her gut. Aid had never come for Terrason from the Fae, from Wendelin, and it was all because... I do not have more time to spare you, Maeve said, so let me be brief. My eyes have told me that you have questions questions that no mortal has the right to ask. About the keys. Legend said Maeve could commune with the spirit world. Had Elena or Nehemiah told her? Selena opened her mouth, but Maeve held up a hand. I'll give you those answers. You may come to me in Dornell to receive them. Why not? A growl from Rowan at the interruption. Because they are answers that require time, Maeve said, then slowly added as if she savored every word. And answers you've not yet earned. Tell me what I can do to earn them, and I'll do it. Fool. A damn fool's response. A dangerous thing to offer without hearing the price. You want me to show you my magic? I'll show it to you. But not here. I have no interest in seeing you drop your magic at my feet like a sack of grain. I want to see what you can do with it, Aelin Galathinius, which currently seems like not very much at all. Selena's stomach tightened at the cursed name. I want to see what you will become under the right circumstances. I do not permit mortals or half-breeds into Dornell. For a half-breed to enter my realm, she must prove herself both gifted and worthy. Mistward, this fortress. She waved a hand to encompass the room as one of several proving grounds, and a place where those who do not pass the test can spend their days. Beneath the growing fear, a flicker of disgust went through her. Half-breed. Maeve said it with such disdain. And what manner of test might I expect before I am deemed worthy? Maeve gestured to Rowan, who had not moved from the door. You shall come to me once Prince Rowan decides that you have mastered your gifts. He shall train you here, and you shall not set foot in Dornell until he deems your training complete. After facing the horse shit she'd seen in the glass castle, demons, witches, the king, training with Rowan, even in magic, seemed rather anticlimactic. But it would take weeks, months, years. The familiar fog of nothing crept in, threatening to smother her once again. She pushed it back long enough to say, What I need to know isn't something that can wait. You want answers regarding the keys, heir of Terrason? Then they shall be waiting for you in Dornell. The rest is up to you. Truthfully, Selena blurted, you will truthfully answer my questions about the keys. Maeve smiled, and it was not a thing of beauty. You haven't forgotten all of your ways, then. When Selena didn't react, Maeve added, I will truthfully answer all your questions about the keys. It might be easier to walk away. Go find some other ancient being to pester for the truth. Selena breathed in and out. But Maeve had been there. Had been there at the dawn of this world during the Valg Wars. She had held the word keys. She knew what they looked like, how they felt. Maybe she even knew where Brannon had hidden them, especially the last unnamed key. And if Selena could find a way to steal the keys from the king, to destroy him, to stop his armies and free Ilby, even if she could find just one word key. What manner of training? Prince Rowan shall explain the specifics. For now, he will escort you to your chamber to rest. Selena looked Maeve straight in her death-dealing eyes. You swear you'll tell me what I need to know. I do not break my promises, and I have the feeling that you are unlike your mother in that regard, too. Bitch. No, literally, bitch, she wanted to hiss. But then Maeve's eyes flicked to Selena's left palm. She knew everything. Through whatever spies or power or guesswork, Maeve knew everything about her and the vow to Nehemiah. To what end? Selena asked softly, the anger and the fear dragging her down into an inescapable exhaustion. You want me to train only so I can make a spectacle of my talents? Maeve ran a moon-white finger down the owl's head. I wish you to become who you were born to be. To become queen. Become queen. The words haunted Selena that night, kept her from sleeping, even though she was so exhausted she could have wept for the dark-eyed Silba to put her out of her misery. Queen. The word throbbed right along with the fresh split lip that also made sleeping very uncomfortable. She could thank Rowan for that. After Maeve's command, Selena hadn't bothered with goodbyes before walking out. Rowan had only cleared the way because Maeve gave him a nod, and he followed Selena into a narrow hallway that smelled of roasting meat and garlic. Her stomach grumbled, but she'd probably hurl her guts up the second she swallowed anything. So she trailed Rowan down the corridor, down the stairs, each footstep alternating between iron-willed control and growing rage. Left, Nehemiah. Right, you made a vow, and you will keep it by whatever means necessary. Left, training, queen. Right? Bitch. Manipulative, cold-blooded, sadistic bitch. Ahead of her, Rowan's own steps were silent on the dark stones of the hallway. The torches hadn't been lit yet, and in the murky interior she could hardly tell he was there. But she knew. If only because she could almost feel the ire radiating off of him. Good. At least one other person wasn't particularly thrilled about this bargain. Training. Training. Her whole life had been training. From the moment she was born. Rowan could train her until he was blue in the face, and as long as it got her the answers about the word keys, she'd play along. But it didn't mean that. When the time came, she had to do anything. Certainly not take up her throne. She didn't even have a throne, or a crown, or a court. She didn't want them. And she could bring down the king as Selena Sardothian. Thank you very much. She tightened her fingers into fists. Wait. Sorry. They encountered no one as they descended a winding staircase and started down another corridor. Did the residents of this fortress, Mistward, Maeve had called it, know who was in that study upstairs? Maeve probably got off on terrifying them. Maybe she had all of them, half-breeds she'd called them, enslaved through some bargain or another. Disgusting. It was disgusting to keep them here just for having a mixed heritage that was not fault of theirs. Selena finally opened her mouth. You must be very important to her immortal majesty if she put you on nurse duty. Given your history, she didn't trust anyone but her best to keep you in line. Oh, the prince wanted to tangle. Whatever self-control he'd had on their trek to the fortress was hanging by a thread. Good. Playing warrior in the woods doesn't seem like the greatest indicator of talent. I fought on killing fields long before you, your parents, or your grand-uncle were even born. She bristled. Exactly what he wanted. Who's to fight here except birds and beasts? Silence. Then, the world is far bigger and more dangerous, and a more dangerous place than you can imagine, girl. Consider yourself blessed to receive any training, to have the chance to prove yourself. I've seen plenty of this big and dangerous world, Princeling. A soft, harsh laugh. Just wait, Aelin. Another jab, and she let herself fall for it. Don't call me that. It's your name. I'm not going to call you anything different. She stepped in his path, getting right near those two sharp canines. No one here can know who I am. Do you understand? His green eyes gleamed, animal bright in the dark. My aunt has given me a harder task than she realizes, I think. My aunt, not our. Why am I saying aunt? Aunt. And then, she said, one of the foulest things she'd ever uttered in her life, bathing in the pure hate of it. They like you make me understand the King of Ardalan's actions a bit more, I think. Faster than she could sense, faster than anything had a right to be, he punched her. He punched her? Let me get this straight. He's related to her, and he abuses women. And I'm supposed to like him? You know who would never? Dorian. You know who also would never? Sam. I don't like him right now. I don't like him right now. But I guess we'll see. Can only hopefully go up from here. She shifted enough to keep her nose from shattering, but took the blow on her mouth. She hit the wall, whacked her head, and tasted blood. Good. Reese would also never. Yeah. Literally, I don't like him. He struck her again? He struck again? With that immortal speed, or would have, but with equally unnerving swiftness, he halted his second blow before it fractured her jaw and snarled in her face, low and vicious. Yeah, I know, but at the same time, that doesn't mean we can hit people. That doesn't, I don't know. Her breathing turned ragged as she purred. Do it. He looked more interested in ripping out her throat than in talking, but he held the line he'd drawn. Why should I give you what you want? You're just as useless as the rest of your brethren. He let out a soft laugh that raked claws down her temper. If you're that desperate to eat stone, go ahead. I'll let you try to land the next punch. She knew better than to listen, but there was such a roar in her blood that she could no longer see right, think right, breathe right. So she damned the consequences to hell as she swung. Okay, now she's asking for it. Selena hit nothing but air, and then his foot hooked behind hers in an efficient maneuver that sent her careening into the wall once more. Impossible. He tripped her as if she was nothing more than a trembling novice. He was now a few feet away, arms crossed. She spat blood and swore. He smirked. It was enough to send her hurtling for him again, to tackle or pummel or strangle him. She didn't know. She caught his feint left, but when she dove right, he moved so swiftly that despite her lifetime of training, she crashed into a darkened brazier behind him. The clatter echoed through the too quiet hall as she landed face first on the stone floor, her teeth singing. Like I said, Rowan sneered down at her. You have a lot to learn about everything. Her lip already aching and swollen, she told him exactly what he could go do to himself. He sauntered down the hall. Next time you say anything like that, he said without looking over his shoulder, I'll have you chopping wood for a month. Fuming, hatred, and shame already burning her face, Selena got to her feet. He dumped her in a very small, very cold room that looked like little more than a prison cell, letting her take all of 2 steps inside before he said, Give me your weapons. Why? And no. Like hell she'd give him her daggers. In a swift movement, he grabbed a bucket of water from beside her door, and tossed the contents onto the hall floor before holding it out. Give me your weapons. Training with him would be absolutely wonderful. Tell me why. I don't have to explain myself to you. Then we're going to have another brawl. His tattoos seeming impossibly darker in the dim hall, he stared at her beneath lowered brows as if to say, You call that a brawl? But instead he growled, Starting at dawn, you'll earn your keep by helping in the kitchen. Unless you plan to murder everyone in the fortress, there's no need for you to be armed, or to be armed while we train. So I'll keep your daggers until you've earned them back. Well, that felt familiar. The kitchen? He bared his teeth in a wicked grin. Everyone pulls their weight here. Princesses included. No one's above some hard labor, least of all you. And didn't she have the scars to prove it? Not that she'd tell him that. She didn't know what she'd do if he learned about Endivere and mocked her for it, or pitied her. So my training includes being a scullery maid. Part of it. Again, she could have sworn she could read the unspoken words in his eyes, and I'm going to savor every damn second of your misery. For an old bastard, you certainly haven't bothered to learn... You certainly haven't bothered to learn manners at any point in your long existence. Never mind that he looked to be in his late 20s. Why should I waste flattery on a child who's already in love with herself? We're related, you know. Okay. I didn't need the reminder. I didn't need the reminder. We have as much blood in common as I do with the fortress pig boy. She felt her nostrils flare, and he shoved the bucket in her face. She almost knocked it right back into his, but decided that she didn't want a broken nose and began disarming herself. Rowan counted every weapon she put in the bucket as though he'd already learned how many she'd been carrying, even the hidden ones. And he tucked the bucket against his side and slammed the door without so much as a goodbye beyond be ready at dawn. Bastard. Old stinking bastard, she muttered, surveying the room. A bed, a chamber pot, and a wash basin with icy water. She debated a bath, but opted to use the water to clean out her mouth and tend to her lip. She was starving, but going to find food involved meeting people. So when she'd mended her lip as best she could with the supplies in her satchel, she tumbled into bed, reeking vagrant clothes and all, and lay there for several hours. There was one small window with no coverings in her room. Selena turned over in bed to look through it to the patch of stars above the trees surrounding the fortress. lashing out at Rowan like that, saying the things she did, trying to fight with him. She deserved that punch. More than deserved it. If she was being honest with herself, she was barely passable as a human being these days. She fingered her split lip and winced. She scanned the night sky until she located the stag, the Lord of the North, the unmoving star atop the stag's head, the eternal crown, pointed the way to Terrasen. She'd been told that the great rulers of Terrasen turned into those bright stars so their people would never be alone, and would always know the way home. She hadn't set foot there in 10 years. While he'd been her master, Erebin hadn't let her, and afterwards she hadn't dared. She had whispered the truth that day at Nehemiah's grave. She'd been running for so long that she didn't know what it was to stand and fight. Selena loosed a breath and rubbed her eyes. What Maeve didn't understand, what she could never understand, was just how much that little princess in Terrasen had damned them a decade ago, even worse than Maeve herself had. She had damned them all, and then left the world to burn into ash and dust. So Selena turned away from the stars, nestling under the threadbare blanket against the frigid cold, and closed her eyes, trying to dream of a different world, a world where she was no one at all. I'm tired of her feeling like this. I want her to be happy. I want my girl to be happy. Chapter 9. Manon Blackbeak Manon! Stood on a cliff beside the snow-swollen river, eyes closed as the damp wind bit her face. Ouch. There were few sounds she enjoyed more than the groans of dying men, but the wind was one of them. Leaning into the breeze was the closest she came to flying these days, save in rare dreams, when she was again in the clouds, her ironwood broom still functioning, not the scrap of useless wood it was now, chucked into the closet of her room at Blackbeak Keep. It had been 10 years since she'd tasted mist and cold and ridden on the back of the wind. Today would have been a flawless flying day, the wind wicked and fast. Today she would have soared. Behind her, Mother Blackbeak was still talking with the enormous man from the caravan who called himself a duke. It had been more than coincidence, she supposed, that soon she... Is that Duke Parrington? It had been more than coincidence, she supposed, that soon after she'd left that blood-soaked field in Fenharrow, she'd received a summons from her grandmother. And more than coincidence that she'd been not 40 miles from the rendezvous points just over the border in Ardalan. Manon was on guard duty while her grandmother, the High Witch of the Blackbeak clan, spoke to the Duke beside the raging Acanthus River. The rest of her coven had taken their positions around the small encampment, 12 other witches, all around Manon's age, all of them raised and trained together. Like Manon, they had no weapons, but it seemed that the Duke knew enough to realize Blackbeaks didn't really need weapons to be deadly. You didn't need a weapon at all when you were born one. And when you were one of Manon's 13, with whom she'd had fought and flown for the past 100 years, often just the name of the coven was enough to send enemies fleeing. The 13 did not have a reputation for mercy or making mistakes. Manon eyed the armored guards around the camp. Half were watching the Blackbeak witches, the other monitoring the Duke and her grandmother. It was an honor that the High Witch had chosen the 13 to guard her. No other coven had been summoned. No other coven was needed if the 13 were present. Manon slid her attention to the nearest guard. His sweat, the faint tang of fear, and the heavy musk of exhaustion drifted toward her. From the look and smell of it, they'd been traveling for weeks. There were 2 prison wagons with them. One emitted a very distinct male odor, and perhaps a remnant of cologne. One was female. Both smelled wrong. Manon had been born soulless, her grandmother said. Soulless and heartless, as a Blackbeak ought to be. She was wicked right down to the marrow of her bones. But the people in those wagons, and the Duke, they smelled wrong. Different. Alien. The nearby guard shifted on his feet. She gave him a smile. His hand tightened on the hilt of his sword. Manon? I like saying Manon. Manon? 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 I don't know. Because she could. Because she was growing bored. Manon cocked her jaw, sending her iron teeth snapping down. The guard took a step back, his breath coming faster. The acrid taste of tang of fear, sharpening. With her moon-white hair, alabaster skin, and burnt gold eyes, she'd been told by ill-fated men that she was beautiful as a fey queen. But what those men realized too late was that her beauty was merely a weapon in her natural-born arsenal, and it made things so fun. Feet crunched in the snow and bits of dead grass, and Manon turned from the trembling guard and the roaring brown acanthus to find her grandmother approaching. In the 10 years since magic had vanished, their aging process had warped. Manon herself was well over a century old, but until 10 years ago she had looked no older than 16. Now she looked to be in her mid-20s. They were aging like mortals. They had soon realized with no small amount of panic. And her grandmother. The rich, voluminous midnight robes of Mother Blackbeak flowed like water in the crisp breeze. Her grandmother's face was now marred with the beginnings of wrinkles, her ebony hair sprinkled with silver. The High Witch of the Blackbeak clan wasn't just beautiful, she was alluring. Even now, with mortal years pressing down upon her bone-white skin, there was something entrancing about the matron. "We leave now," Mother Blackbeak said, walking north along the river. Behind them, the Duke's men closed ranks around the encampment. Smart for mortals to be so cautious when the 13 were present, and bored. One jerk of the chin from Manon was all it took for the 13 to fall in line. The 12 other sentinels kept the required distance behind Manon and her grandmother, footsteps near silent in the winter grass. None of them had been able to find a single Crochin in the months they'd been infiltrating town after town, and Manon fully expected some form of punishment for it later. Flogging, perhaps a few broken fingers, nothing too permanent. But it would be public. That was her grandmother's preferred method of punishment. Not the how, but the humiliation. Yet her grandmother's gold-flecked black eyes, the heirloom of Blackbeak clan's purest bloodline, were bent on the northern horizon toward oak-walled forest and the towering white fangs far beyond. The gold-speckled eyes were the most cherished trait in their clan for a reason Manon had never bothered to learn, and when her grandmother had seen that Manon's were wholly of pure, dark gold, the matron had carried her away from her daughter's still cooling corpse and proclaimed Manon her undisputed heir. Her grandmother kept walking, and Manon didn't press her to speak, not unless she wanted her tongue ripped clean from her mouth. "We're to travel north," her grandmother said when the encampment was swallowed up by the foothills. "I want you to send 3 of your 13 south, west, and east. They are to seek out our kith and kin and inform them that we will all assemble in the Farian Gap. Every last Blackbeak, no witch or sentinel left behind." Nowadays there was no difference. Every witch belonged to a coven, and was therefore a sentinel. Since the downfall of their western kingdom, since they had started clawing for their survival, every Blackbeak, Yellowlegs, and Blue Blood had to be ready to fight, ready at any time to reclaim their lands or die for their people. Manon herself had never set foot in the former witch kingdom, had never seen the ruins or the flat, green expanse that stretched to the western sea. None of her 13 had seen it either, all of them wanderers and exiles thanks to a curse from the last Crochin queen as she bled out on that legendary battlefield. The matron went on, still staring at the mountains. "And if your sentinels see members of the other clans, they are to inform them to gather in the gap too. No fighting, no provoking, just spread the word." Her grandmother's iron teeth flashed in the afternoon sun. Like most of the ancient witches, the ones who had been born in the Witch Kingdom and fought in the Iron Teeth Alliance to shatter the chains of the Crochin Queens, Mother Blackbeak wore her iron teeth permanently on display. Manon had never seen them retracted. Manon bit back her questions. The Farian Gap, the deadly, blasted bit of land between the White Fang and Rune Mountains, and one of the few passes between the fertile lands of the east and the western wastes. Manon had made that passage through the snow-crested labyrinth of caves and ravines on foot, just once. With the 13 and 2 other covens, right after magic had vanished, when they were all nearly blind, deaf, and dumb with the agony of suddenly being grounded. Half of the other witches hadn't made it through the gap. The 13 had barely survived, and Manon had almost lost an arm to an ice cavern cave-in. almost lost it, but kept it thanks to the quick thinking of Astrid, her second in command, and the brute strength of Sorel, her third. The Varian Gap. Manon hadn't been back since. For months now there had been rumors of far darker things than witches dwelling there. Baba Yellowlegs is dead. Manon whipped her head to her grandmother, who was smiling faintly. Killed, then Rifthold. The Duke received word. No one knows who or why. Crochans? Perhaps. Mother Blackbeak's smile spread, revealing iron teeth spotted with rust. The King of Ardalan has invited us to assemble in the Varian Gap. He says he has a gift for us there. And y'all trust that man? Manon considered what she knew about the vicious, deadly king hell-bent on conquering the world. Her responsibility as both coven leader and heir was to keep her grandmother alive. It was instinct to anticipate every pitfall, every potential threat. It could be a trap, to gather us in one place and then destroy us. He could be working with the Crochans, or perhaps the Bluebloods. They've always wanted to make themselves high witches of every Iron Teeth clan. Oh, I think not. Mother Blackbeak purred, her depthless ebony eyes crinkling. For the king has made us an offer. Made all the Iron Teeth clans an offer. Manon waited, even though she could have gutted someone just to ease the miserable impatience. The king needs riders, Mother Blackbeak said, still staring at the horizon. Riders for his wyverns, to be his aerial cavalry. He's been breeding them in the Gap all these years. It had been a while, too damn long, but Manon could feel the threads of fate twisting around them, tightening. And when we're done, when we have served him, he will let us keep the wyverns, to take our host to reclaim the wastes from the mortal pigs who now dwell there. A fierce, wild thrill pierced Manon's chest, sharp as a knife. Following the matron's gaze, Manon looked to the horizon, where the mountains were still blanketed with winter. To fly again, to soar through the mountain passes, to hunt down prey the way they'd been born to. They weren't enchanted ironwood brooms, but wyverns would do just fine. I'm ready, yeah. Run, bulletproof, run. I have to ask, is Manon... I lost my train of thought. Is Manon a villain? That's what I meant to say. A bad guy? What's up, Nico? Yes, I want 80 fan art, because that... Did Maeve remind you of anyone? Yes. Are we talking about from this series or from another SJM series? Did she remind me of someone from Throne of Glass, or did she remind me of someone from, like... Okay, yes, she did. Why? She reminded me of a certain Archeron sister. Is this the... Which one? Nesta? I was gonna say but didn't she have, like, black hair? Hold on. Shadows and claws and a darkness to devour your soul. Oh, maybe Feyre. Hold on. No, the dark sister to the fair-haired Mab. Okay, I'm moving on. Chapter 10. After a grueling day of training new recruits, avoiding Dorian, and we're back in Rifthold. Oh, yay. Avoiding Dorian and keeping well away from the king's watchful eye, Cale was almost at his rooms, more than ready to sleep, when he noticed that 2 of his men were missing from their posts outside the great hall. The 2 remaining men winced as he stopped dead. It wasn't unusual for guards to occasionally miss a shift. If someone was sick, if they had some family tragedy, Cale always found a replacement. But 2 missing guards with no replacement in sight. Someone had better start talking, he ground out. One of them cleared their throats, a newer guard who had just finished his training 3 months before. The other one was relatively new too, which was why he'd assigned them to night duty outside the empty Great Hall. But he'd put them under the supposedly responsible and watchful eyes of the 2 other guards, both of whom had been there for years. The guard who'd cleared his throat went red. Captain, they said that no one would really notice if they were gone, since it's the Great Hall and it's empty, and, use your words, Cale snapped. He was going to murder the 2 deserters. The General's party, sir, said the other. General Ash River walked past on his way into Rifthold and invited them to join him. He said it would be all right with you, so they went with him. A muscle feathered in his jaw. Of course Adian did. And you too? Cale growled. Didn't think it would be useful to report this to anyone? With all due respect, sir, said the second one. We didn't want them to think we were ratters. And it's just the Great Hall. Wrong thing to say, Cale snarled. You're both on double duty for a month in the gardens, where it was still freezing. Your leisure time is now non-existent, and if you ever again fail to report another guard abandoning his post, you're both gone. Understood? While he got a mumbled confirmation, he stalked toward the front gate of the castle. Like hell, he'd go to sleep now. He had 2 guards to hunt down in Rifthold, and a general to exchange some words with. I get more Adian. Yay! Yay me! Chapter 10, page 73. Adian had rented out an entire tavern. Men were at the door to keep out the riffraff, but one glare from Cale, one glimpse of that eagle-shaped pommel of the eagle-shaped pommel of his sword, had them stepping aside. The tavern was crammed with various nobles, some women who could have been courtesans or courtiers, and men, lots of drunk, boisterous men. Card games, dice, body singing to the music made by the small quintet by the roaring fire. Sorry, y'all, my mind is not here today. Free-flowing taps of ale, bottles of sparkling wine. Was Adian going to pay for this with his blood money, or was it on the king? Cale spotted his 2 guards, plus a half a dozen others, playing cards, women in their laps, grinning like fiends, until they saw him. They were still groveling as Cale sent them packing, back to the castle where he would deal with them tomorrow. He couldn't decide whether they deserved to lose their positions, since Adian had lied, and he didn't like making choices like that unless he'd slept on them first. So out they went, into the freezing night, and then Cale began the process of hunting down the general. I love that she likes him but doesn't like Rowan. Okay, but... Stop. It's not the same. Stop. But no one knew where he was. First, someone sent Cale upstairs to one of the tavern's bedrooms, where he indeed found the 2 women someone said Adian had slipped away with, but another man was between them. Cale only demanded where the general had gone. The woman said they'd seen him playing dice in the cellar with some masked, high-ranking nobles, so Cale stormed down there. And indeed, there were the masked, high-ranking nobles. They were pretending to be mere revelers, but Cale recognized them anyway, even if he didn't call them out by name. They insisted Adian was last seen playing the fiddle in the main room, so Cale went back upstairs. Adian was certainly not playing the fiddle, or the drum, or the flute, or the lute, or the pipes. In fact, it seemed that Adian Ash River wasn't even at his own party. A courtesan prowled up to him to sell her wares, and would have walked away at his snarl had Cale not offered her a silver coin for information about the general. She'd seen him leave an hour ago, on the arm of one of her rivals, headed off to a more private location, but she didn't know where. If Adian was no longer here, then Cale went back to the castle. But he did hear one more bit of information. The Bane would arrive soon, people said, and when the Legion descended on the city, they planned to show Rifthold a whole new level of debauchery. All of Cale's guards were invited, apparently. It was the last thing he wanted or needed, an entire legion of lethal warriors wreaking havoc on Rifthold and distracting his men. If that happened, the king might look too closely at Kale, or ask where he sometimes disappeared to. So he needed to have more than just words with Adian. He needed to find something to use against him, so Adian would agree not to throw these parties and swear to keep his bane under control. Tomorrow night, he'd go to whatever party Adian threw and see what leverage he could find. Okay, why can I not dislike Rowan but not like Adian? Because Adian so far hasn't shown me anything like wrong. Like, this man is just trying to survive, I feel like. And I feel like the ring that he has, you'll see about Rowan, and you can like Adian. Oh, okay. Doing so good. I mean, I don't like him now. That's not to say I won't like him later. Yeah, if he's her end game, then I guess I'll have to learn to like him. I'm hoping this is one of those Reese situations, because y'all saw that car go in reverse. What the anyway, I'm hoping this is like that, like a Reese situation, because I did not like Reese Sand at first. I thought he was creepy. I thought he was slimy and not trustworthy. I have faith B will be on the Rowan train eventually. Yeah. So, I mean, but okay, I like Rowan more than the Bat Boys. Listen. I can understand liking Rowan maybe more than Reese. That car is fucking jetting. I can understand that, because Reese is like, he's Reese. He's alright. More than Azriel? Azriel for me is, okay, I know I talk a lot of game about Eris. I'm mostly just like attracted to him because I like, you know. But Azriel for me is the top. Azriel is my top SJM man. And then Cassian, and then Eris. No, girl, Rowan is number one. Rowan is the Azriel of Throne of Glass. Stop. Are you for real? Are you for real? There goes that fucking car again. I don't know what it's doing. Are you for real? We don't even know Az. He's just the quiet, broody boy. But I love him. Don't tell me that, Sarah. I love him. Dorian is the Az of Throne of Glass. That's what I was gonna say. But Rowan? Okay, Azriel gets he's the quiet, broody boy, but like, we know his traumas, and we know why he acts that way. It's because of his traumas. And I can't wait for him to get a book. To get his book and end up with... Oh, wait. Never mind. I don't want to spoil anything in case anyone hasn't read A Court of Thorns and Roses. Exactly. Azriel would never hit anyone. He would never put his hands on someone like that. Someone that... Okay, he does torture people, but like... I'm talking about like a girl. Yes. And also, can we just step back and appreciate the fact that Nesta had no right. Let me make one thing clear. I am not defending Nesta, but she did say some horrible shit to Cassian. Horrendous shit to him. And he never once even thought of putting his fucking hands on her. So, let me just say that. I just had to get that out in the open. Queen of Shadows. Let me tell you some books that I'm not looking forward to reading. Lost my train of thought. Oh my god. Queen of Shadows, sorry, that's the book I'm not looking forward to reading. And Kingdom of Ash. And there's one more that I've seen people talk about that it made them very emotional. It might have been this book, honestly, but I'm not sure. I'm not looking forward to reading it just because I know it's made people cry. Those are the best books. But aren't those like the most painful books? Every time I see someone having some form of like big reaction to the books, it's those two books. Queen of Shadows is probably the least traumatic. I think it's Empire of Storms. I think that's another one I've heard of that people are like, what? Throwing up, screaming, crying. Honestly, for me, I don't think it gets worse than Assassin's Blade. And y'all can tell me that it does. It does not get worse than that. It can't get worse than that. That was literally worst case scenario. It can't get worse than that. For me, personally. Yeah. That was literally worst case scenario that went on. So, Nehemiah's death really affected me. It did. Honestly, I'm still mad that she had to die for all of this to be set into motion. Because I was really looking forward. See, now I'm gonna start crying because I'm thinking about Nehemiah. Queen of Shadows is on level. On level? Are you kidding me? Empire of Storms had me ugly crying. Y'all, why did I agree to read this series, y'all? Ugh. Okay. Yeah. But no, back to Nehemiah. I really wanted to see her leading an army in, because obviously there's going to be like a big final battle, right? And I had already pictured it in my head that she was going to come in leading her army against Ardalan and like, you know, be in this big fight. And and now she's not. And it's so annoying, and it's so like, it's just so disheartening that she's not going to have that moment, and she's not gonna get it. And it's really sad to think about. It sucks. Because you literally said you wanted to cry. Yes, I know I said it in the moment, but now that I'm actually going through it, it's not fun. It's fun to think about, and it's fun to, I'm pretty sure I'll laugh at all of this whenever I'm finished with the series, but in the moment, it's not fun. It's just not fair. Yeah, none of it is fair. Queen of Shadows is my favorite, I think, after Assassin's Blade. I think Assassin's Blade will always be my number one. It'll always be that book for me. Because Assassin's Blade for me, I don't even know why I liked it so as much as I did. I thoroughly loved that book. And I think I would read it again skip the end, but like read the whole leading up to the end again. It's just, I just loved it. I loved the introduction of Selena, and I loved the different storylines that were involved in there, and I just think it was amazing. It was so good. I loved it. I wish I could go back to that ignorant little bee that I was whenever I was first reading it. I had so much hope. And now look at me. I feel like Selena. Ugh. Queen of Shadows is my favorite. It's a non-stop party. You can't say that when the only other two you read is Throne of Glass and... Okay, but like for now. That's what I'm saying, for now. I don't know. I'm really glad that I read the Assassin's Blade first, but then a part of me sometimes wishes that I wouldn't have, because I went in with this perception that she was going to end up with Sam, and that she was going to be with Sam, and that, you know, maybe they were going to get separated. I knew something bad was going to happen because it was a prequel, But I thought maybe, okay, maybe Sam ends up betraying her. Okay, we can work through that. Or maybe she and Sam get separated and the whole rest of the books is about her getting back to him. That's what I thought it was going to be when I was reading it. And so I had this big notion built up in my head that they're going to end up together in the end of the books and that everything was going to be fine. It was going to be really sad in the middle, that we were going to meet some people and they were going to die. But in the end, it was all going to be okay and she was going to be with Sam. And then, you know, he died and I was just like, what? I was so optimistic. I really was. I was so optimistic and I was just like, you know, this is gonna be fine. And then it wasn't. That's what I get. I should have just had it spoiled. I wish I would have just had it spoiled. But I am glad that I read that book first. But then some part of me, I'm like, well, you know, maybe I would be open to other love interests for Selena. The only one I was really open to was Dorian, because I love Dorian. Kale, I was going to tolerate, and Rowan, I feel like I'm just going to tolerate, because they're not Sam. So, in some happy alternate universe, Sam and Selena had their happy ending in my mind. Literally. Y'all know, okay, are y'all on Shift Talk at all? Like, have y'all ever seen anything about, like, reality shifting or anything like that? There was literally a point in time, if you haven't, just ignore this. There was literally a point in time where I was writing, y'all, this is so embarrassing, okay? Please do not judge me. This was in a moment of grief, right? There was a moment in time where I was scripting a reality where I went and told Sam and Selena to just run away. And, you know, I wrote that everything would end up okay. And I literally just made up this script and I was just like, I tell them to run away and they run away and they live happily ever after. And that was it. I was going to leave that reality knowing that they were going to be fine. Y'all. That's how much that affected me. That's literally how much that affected me. But I have never shifted. I've tried and I will continue to try until I die, because literally what could be better than shifting into a book? But I have not been able to, unfortunately, successfully, so not yet, anyway. I know for a fact you'll have a severe love and hate relationship with Empire of Storms. I know that and I'm not looking forward to it, but I know that there has to be a moment where Selena gets closure for Sam. Because this can't continue, right? Like, it can't be this always, like, unending, like, you know, thinking back on Sam, because, you know, she never took care of his body. He wasn't buried before she was sent off to Endovier. She never got to say goodbye to him before he died. The last words she literally said to him, they're seared into my brain, was, "I hate packing." And so I know that there has to be a moment where she says goodbye to him. Maybe when she ends up finding who she really truly ends up with, which is probably Rowan. So I know that there has to be a moment where she says goodbye, and in that moment I want y'all to respect the person that I become, because if you thought that I was crying hard for Assassin's Blade, which I was, I did cry hard, y'all are not prepared for the person I'm going to become when Selena finally has closure and says goodbye to Sam. Y'all aren't ready. Do you remember in Assassin's Blade when Selena is at the party and that guy in the mask asks her to dance? Yes, I do. What about it? He's a good second choice for Sam, I guess. I mean, she has to end up with somebody. And if it's not Dorian, well. No. Say psych right now. Are you for real? How do you... Nico, are you for real? I'm about to go back into Assassin's Blade and reread that shit. Are you serious? Oh my God! How do y'all know? Are you... Oh my God. Why would she not make Dorian her end game then? That would have been full circle. I'm gonna go reread it. My mind is blown. No, I loved that scene. And when Sam was like, what was that? What is that quote that he tells her? That I'm still gonna be here begging for your attention or something like that, even though you pay me dirt, or even though you act like I'm not worth the dirt under your feet, or something like that. That quote that he says to her, I was throwing up. I was coming apart at the seams. Like, yes. Ah! Ah! I love him so much. It always, this is honestly, at the end of every live, it is always the I love and miss Sam Cortland fan club. It is always the same. Let's mourn and grieve and talk about Sam Cortland at the end of every live. And I'm here for it. Because I could talk about this man for the rest of my life. I love him so incredibly much. Sam went toe to toe with the prince and didn't even know. I'm gonna go reread that part. I deserve it. I owe it to myself. I haven't touched Assassin's Blade since I finished it. I haven't looked at it. I threw it whenever I got home after that live. When I finished it, I threw it, and it's been sitting in that same spot. I haven't touched it, and I don't want to. But now I'm gonna go back and reread that because for lifers, I love him. So, yeah. Love that man. Sammy. Y'all, I don't know. Oh, I didn't tell y'all. Oh, no, never mind. We won't talk about that. I periodically reread page 311 sometimes. Y'all, I cannot believe y'all let me post that TikTok where I was screaming about Sam's love confession. That was so embarrassing. It's so embarrassing to watch my TikToks back. Okay, after this live, I'm gonna go make a TikTok about how I don't like Rowan so that I can stitch it eventually when hopefully I do like him. Yeah, Rowan will grow on you for sure. I hope he does. He better. If he's gonna be taking Sam's spot, then he better fucking grow on me. If I do, you will too. Yeah, you're right. Nicole, you're like my bestie in this Sam Cortland Forever group. Sam Cortland Forever, just like club that we have. The stitch though is amazing. Yeah, I know it was. It was really good. And that wasn't even the day that I filmed that stitch. It wasn't even the day that I finished the Assassin's Blade. It was like 2 days after I finished it, and I was still crying over it. My angel. I love that man so much. I'm so mad. I'm so mad that it's not him. I'm so mad. I'm gonna go reread The Assassin's Blade. I'm gonna reread it. And I'm gonna read that ball scene over 10,000 times now that I know that Dorian and Kale are there. She's spoken for. I felt so bad. Yeah. You know how I said that I wanted to cry? How I said that I wanted to start this series because I wanted to feel something? I felt enough. And it can stop now. We can go up from here and I will be fine. No one else can die and I will be fine. I bit off more than I could chew with this one. Oh, I don't know the page. And I don't have the book with me. I reread it after Queen of Shadows. And it's the perfect spot to memorialize it. Oh, so Queen of Shadows is when Selena says goodbye. Four more books. Not looking forward to it. I am looking forward to the end when supposedly everything gets happy. Oh, God. Alright, well, tomorrow's Friday. Boo. I was gonna say I'll see y'all tomorrow, but I won't. I might not be able to go live on Saturday either. I am going to be looking for a new car. Or, well, I'm not going to be getting a new car, but I'm going to go look at cars on Saturday. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I can't do a live on Saturday. If Sam would have been endgame, Aelin wouldn't become and be who she needed to be. Yeah, I guess. I think they still could have found a way, but whatever. What kind of car do you have now? I have a Sonata. I have a Hyundai Sonata, and I've had it for about 5 years. And I have 1 more year for pay, like until I pay it off. But my parents want to make it into like a family car, so I'm letting them take over my payments, and then I'm going to go get a new car with hopefully lower payments. Because it's not that I even pay a lot for it, but it would just be nice to have lower payments and a new car. So, but I have like a 2018 Sonata, and this girl, I put this car through the ringer, and she has never let me down. So I love her. I think I'm gonna get another car from Hyundai, but I want an SUV. I want a mom car, because like I nanny and I have to like bend down to get Venus out of her seat, and so I don't want to do that. And I just like mom cars because they're mom cars. Mom is the car lady. You can give me a discount for Chrysler? Oh yes, please. I will go get a Chrysler just to get a discount. But okay, I'll let you know. I didn't. Jeep, Chrysler, Ram, Fiat, Dodge. Mom car for the win. Yeah, I love mom cars. They're so nice. Okay, Sarah, I'll message you. I'll ask, because I don't know what I'm doing when I go look for cars. When I was looking for this car, this was the first car that they showed me, and I ended up leaving with it because I had no idea what I was doing. They were like, oh, you know, this car, because originally I had gone wanting a Volkswagen. I wanted a Jetta, and then the sales guy was like, oh, get a Sonata, they're cheaper, and you get more like electronic goodies that come with it, like I guess like the Apple CarPlay and stuff like that. And he was like, this one is brand new, we just got it. And I was like, okay. And he was like, you want to take it for a test run? And I was like, okay. And then we took it for a test run, and then we came back and he was like, so do you want it? And I was like, I guess. And then I bought this car, and I love her. We love Palomita because she's held strong and done good for the past 5 years. But I kind of want to go and look for a car that I don't, not that I settled for her, but just a nice car that I don't know what I'm trying to say. Anyway, I'll see y'all on Sunday. Bye, love y'all.